Hello, how are you? Welcome to another community call of Kleros. This is Wednesday, 5 of November. How are you, Jean? All good?
Very good. Speaking from Brazil today. Happy to be
How
here.
is everything? Are you there for the Eat Latam, right? The
Yes,
Ethereum Brazil.
yes, exactly. It will be this weekend, and it will be the first time that Vitalik will be in Brazil. So everyone here is super excited about it.
Well, that's amazing. So we have a very special thing for you guys today. I'm going to make a presentation because I want to introduce you to a new member of our community, someone who is very special. And for this, let me just give some background about Kleros and how it is a private governance solution. Also, as you know, I mean, I do like history, so let me tell you a bit how the London Stock Exchange started. So, at the beginning in the 17th century, in London, there was this place called Royal Exchange where people traded all kind of goods, like wool, cotton or whatever. And stockbrokers had a little place in the corner, and they would trade, the what was at those times, the very first, stocks from, companies, the East India company, for example. And so at some point, when William III was the King of England, so the Parliament decides to ban stockbrokers from the Royal Exchange because, well, they saw them as doing a sort of speculative activity, and in order to try to curb that speculation, they just, banned them from the exchange place. Okay. Um, I mean, what do you think these DJs did? They just stopped, trading stocks? No, of course not. They went to a back alley, not far from the exchange, a place that now we know as a Change Street or Change Alley. Last April, when I went to London for the King's College conference, we organized at King's College about Kleros and AI and, well, decentralized justice. I took some time to actually visit the Change Alley, and I went there, and this is what it looks now. This is the kind of place where you go to buy. I mean, I don't want to say drugs, but this is a back street where you would go to buy, non very legal stuff, dark place. And so that is where people in the early days in the 17th, 18th centuries traded, stocks. And at some point later, they moved from that alley to a coffee house called Jonathan's Coffee House, which is a very famous place where stockbrokers did lots of different type of trades. There is a book from that time called "Every Man His Own Broker," a guide to the stock exchange by this guy called Thomas Mortimer, that explains how that coffee house worked and how the rules work for people to be able to join that coffee house. And they actually did really complex, operations, really complex, like futures, like derivatives, really, really complex, types of financial transactions. And even Adam Smith, in his book on Lectures on Jurisprudence, he writes a bit about the system of reputation they had at the coffee house and the exchange alley to like a ban, like traders who were non-compliant, traders who were like scammers. And the fascinating part of all this is that all of that was done without any intervention from the government. No, as I said, like financial activity and trading stocks was not an activity that the government would want to encourage. It was seen as, some kind of degen type of activity. So that is how the stock exchange started. So, like, for over 100 years, stockbrokers traded all kinds of stocks, doing all of these super complex and sophisticated um, activities without any government intervention. So they just self-regulated their activities through private rules. So it was a very cool system of private governance. So if you want to learn a bit more about this, which I do recommend you do, you can read this book called Private Governance, Creating Order in Economic and Social Life by Edward Stringham, which explains a bit how this system worked. And also it explains a bit about other private governance systems, such as eBay and other internet situations and more. Why am I speaking to you about this really old stuff about the early days of the London Stock Exchange? Well, because some people, including me, think that maybe crypto as an industry is kind of in the early London Stock Exchange days, in the sense that we have this activity where we are having more and more crypto assets that are being issued worldwide and lots of different types. And we have regulatory regime, public regulation, which cannot follow, this new creation of crypto assets done by lots of different teams from different countries. Some of them are anonymous and cross jurisdiction with all of the complexity you can imagine. So it's very hard for regulators to keep, up to speed with all of this new financial system that is being created, and this increases by a lot the risk of fraud. Well, I don't need to explain to you that because we are in a crypto, audience here. So lots of scams, fake situations, and and all that happens in this new world of finance. And Brian Armstrong made this tweet a few months ago where he explained, so there is like 1 million crypto assets being created per week. So how can regulators, keep up to speed with those? So it's really hard for a public regulation system to resolve this situation. And this is why private governance systems can help in this situation to reduce the risk of fraud. And guess what? Well, Kleros can be one of those private regulation systems. And we actually have been doing this for a while already. So in March 2019, we launched this app called Tokens by Kleros, where what we did is a list system where people could submit tokens, and the community would make the vetting process to see if tokens should be accepted or not, in order to be listed into a decentralized exchange, for example. The process works like this. So Alice wants to list a token, so she makes a submission of the token to this list, and she also makes a deposit that will be used as a bounty for people from the community to eventually, challenge her submission. And then there is a number of rules that people will check in order to see if the token complies or not. So some of those rules are about compliance and legal, others are about the team, others about the technology. So lots of different topics that are relevant, and people can check with whether the token complies or not. So let's say nobody has any objection about this token, so this token is accepted into the list, and then the submitter gets back the deposit. Okay, so everyone is happy. Let's say now she wants to submit a token that is a scam or a token that is not compliant with any of some of the rules that I just mentioned. So so she makes a submission with a deposit. Bob can challenge this submission if he thinks it's not compliant. And now we have a situation of a dispute between Alice and Bob. And this dispute is going to be resolved by a Kleros panel, where jurors are going to vote on whether this token complies or not with the conditions to be listed. And let's say Bob wins this trial, so the token is removed from the list, so it's not accepted, and Bob receives the deposit from Alice as a bounty for his job. I mean, for the time it took and the risk he took into challenging and going, making this removal. Okay, so this is basically a private system that verifies which tokens need to be accepted into the list based on the rules that are set forward. And we have one of the most famous Kleros cases actually came from this type of use case. There was a very famous case that was called the buyer chain case. So in 2020, so this team called buyer chain makes a submission of their token to be listed, and the token gets challenged, and well, this goes to Kleros for the trial, and then jurors start to analyze the evidence, and one of the jurors, he sees, okay, this guy Scott Bingley, he claims to be the CTO of the project, and that's curious. This guy doesn't have many papers published. He doesn't have YouTube talks, what one would expect from a major CTO from an important project. And also it said at some point in the white paper that this Scott Bingley was member of some group called the Blockchain Research Laboratories from Oxford. So one of the jurors actually called Oxford and asked for Scott Bingley, and people answered the phone, and then they said, "Oh, look, we have no idea who Scott Bingley is, and there is no such thing as a blockchain research laboratories around here." So it was all a scam. I mean, so this was basically a stock photo that people took and and created this fake profile. So this token, of course, was challenged and removed, and then 6 months later, we read on the news that so this project called Barachain had been classified as a Ponzi by the Chinese police department, and there was a number of arrests and etc. So imagine if Kleros had been used by the Chinese police to verify, the authenticity or the legitimacy of the project. So it could have saved 6 months of people being scammed by a Ponzi, basically. So this is a good example of how a private system of governance can help resolve this type of problems, because there's a lot of people doing challenge and doing resolution for those challenges. And at that moment, another guy called Federico was actually at Oxford, but at the real Oxford, doing a talk in January 2020, when blockchain meets arbitration. This was the first time actually we did some activity together with Oxford, and you will see why this is relevant a bit later. But this product that I mentioned about the tokens eventually got rebranded and etc. And now this is a product we offer under the name of Kleros Scout that is used by MetaMask, Etherscan to verify smart contracts and verify that addresses are not scammy or etc. So this is a really good example of how these systems work as a private governance tool. And if you want to learn a bit more, I can recommend a few readings. So specifically about Kleros, you can see all of this challenging system in this paper by Luis Bergoya, Karen Sif, and Karen Iken. This is called the Sheriff system. So it's a really good paper that analyzes how this private system of challenging works. And what it accomplishes is that in this world of great increase of crypto assets being issued every day, the capacity for regulation with this private governance, steroids, if you want, can increase a lot, and then this can reduce the fraud risk by a lot. Okay, so let me just because this is a topic which is very dear to my heart, because I'm from Argentina, and when you're from a country where things usually don't work, the public things, people resort to private governance and private regulation solutions. So I have done lots of research about this topic, and lots of the ideas that went into Kleros came from lots of these things. So if you are interested in private governance, so I recommend a few books for you. Enterprise of Law by Bruce Benson. This is the Bible of private dispute resolution and private justice. Then the not so wild west. When you think about the Wild West, about a place with lawless, it was lawless, but there was a lot of rules made by institutions that were created, like bounty hunters and all that. So that helped, maintain some semblance of order, not by public means, but through private means, until the government went there, and if you have played Red Dead Redemption, you may have seen, that it's kind of the transition between the times of private governance of the gunslingers to the times of the government taking over the security of the West. Okay, another great book is The Invisible Hook. So it's how pirates actually manage their governance and how they share the booty and how they cared for those who were like injured in combat. So they have a really sophisticated, even I would say, a social security system, totally private and managed by the people from the ship and the captain, and quite democratic, by the way. And another one, legal systems very different from ours. This is a really good compilation of some of this. It also mentions the private system of the pirates. It mentions the Greek system on which Kleros is inspired. So this is an amazing book. Also the Iceland system of the sagas, on which some of the research we are currently doing with William is inspired. Finally, The Rule of Laws by Fernanda Piria, which is a bit of a history of how these private systems helped bring order to the world, over 4,000 years, basically. And last, why am I telling you about this? Because we are super happy to have Ekin Jenk, who is doing his doctorate in law at Oxford. And Ekin is researching private governance system, private legal systems. And at Kleros, we are supporting his doctorate with a partnership. So we are super happy to welcome him here, and so he can tell us a bit about his studies and about him. Hello, Ekin. Welcome to our call.
Hello, good to be here.
Well, welcome. I'm happy that we can be starting our collaboration. Tell us a bit to our community about you. What is your research? How you got interested in the topic, so people get to know you a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ekin. I'm originally Turkish. The whole idea came out of a presentation I did at the DL News company retreat years ago. So I tested the idea there. DL News is where I work as editor-in-chief, by the way, sister organization of DeFi Llama, which tracks DeFi analytics, as those in the community will know. And essentially, it's the research title is Decentralized Finance as Private Order, and it goes to the ideas Federico has masterfully covered. And I'm so glad I don't have my slides up, because I was going to cover the same basics as he did, including this very book that I have on my desk. Excellent book. Right, so the idea is pretty much like the stock exchange example Federico gave, and indeed others, that tight-knit communities can generate social norms, maintain social norms, and they can maintain a sense of order without the need for state courts, state law, or in the scholarship we say state legal systems. But that doesn't mean that they are necessarily antagonistic to the state. One definition in the scholarship we see is that the private orders are usually in the shadow of the state, right? So sometimes states come into play, sometimes there are conflicts, sometimes private orders turn to states for help. So that's the general framework. And as to how that applies to DeFi, if you've been in crypto, blockchain, you'll be familiar with the question, what maintains order in DeFi, or maybe you'll be more familiar with one of the answers to it, which is code is law. And then the second answer, which Federico, you also mentioned, that without the state there shall be chaos, right? There's this idea, and we see in the press, mainstream press, they call crypto, DeFi, they call it the Wild West. And I often like to give example and I move on to say, well, it's not necessarily the Wild West, but that book you showed, I think, is maybe an answer to, well, maybe Wild West is not really wild after all, right? It has its own internal logic, which is true. We see it like the book you showed. We see it with the pirate communities and also with like prison gangs. David Scarbeck has this interesting book on the order of the underworld. Mafia, all sorts of organizations can have their internal logic. And that seems to be very common with merchant communities, fishing communities, and traders, and indeed finance historically. There seems to be something about money being at stake, perhaps, that like ties people together, and perhaps some sort of expertise. Anyways, without getting to in details here, I'll just mention that usually to question what maintains order in DeFi, in scholarship and in the industry as well, and in mainstream media, we see two answers, right? One is Cody's law, which I call techno-determinist idea, because it assumes that technology is what maintains order. It's all smart contracts, it's mathematical logic algorithms, and completely ignoring the human discretion that exists everywhere, from the governance to snapshot, and the informal mechanisms. Think about like SEAL 911, this group that intervenes every time there's a hack. Then we've got like oracles. I mean, even Kleros is one example, right? That people coming together to debate. There's a lot of human discussion. There's a lot of human involvement. It's not all automated. So the idea that Cody's law is unsatisfactory for that reason. And then the other idea, of course, what I call legal centralism, and that's the idea that the state law is the only source of law, only source of order. That's also wrong, because we know historically that we've lived in legally pluralist societies. There have been different sources of order. The book by David Friedman and others is an example of that. Lots of examples here. I mean, Jewish law is the most common one, but like medieval Iceland is one thing you mentioned. Maybe that's an old example, but in the scholarship today, the most famous example, and that's one that still lives on today, is the Jewish diamond traders in New York. And the question, of course, like, why do they even have that? Why don't they resort to a state court system? And the scholarship says that because diamonds are so small, high value, and they're specialist objects, they are difficult to just escalate to state court. So the communities found historically that the state courts were ill-suited for resolving their disputes efficiently. So instead they developed this, private arbitration and reputation-based enforcement system. Similarly, whaling crews in the 18th, 19th centuries, especially in New England, being so far away, from any state authority, they developed these ship's articles because they needed a way to settle their disputes. Clear self-enforcing agreements. And Japan is an interesting one. The Dojima Rice Exchange in the 18th century, Japan, in Osaka, they also relied on self-regulation because futures trading was this novel financial innovation that state institutions had neither the expertise nor the infrastructure to govern efficiently. So then the question arises, why in crypto we see such little reliance on state law, right? I have some, tentative answers. Happy to debate with anyone. One is probably the classic, the technology law gap. It's the same thing with like sharing economy, sharing platform, Uber, that sort of stuff. But that's too broad. Then there's, the technical affordances, because the way blockchain works, the smart contracts, and you deploy it anonymously, you don't have to register anywhere. That kind of allows that system to happen. Then third, you could say there are normative aspirations, and I think that is interesting. So there are like ideological underpinnings that that DeFi separation from the state is actively maintained by, you know, a strong, like, idealistic commitments within the community, where many participants reject like traditional financial regulation, viewing it as like restrictive, opaque, and historically it didn't serve its purposes, and so on. So these are the reasons why that might be the case. So the interesting, Federico, you mentioned like, can we build like private order system? I think the question I want to tackle, I've been tackling, is, well, have we built those systems? I think evidently we kind of have. I think your question is interesting because that goes into whether like these systems can survive long term, you know, whether we can still maintain them. That's something that I also, you know, tackle. Yeah, but the first task is to offer a third alternative to this Cody's law, you know, techno-determinist idea, versus legal centralism. The source of order is only the state. The third alternative, historically, we know that private orders have existed, and we might be seeing one emerging just in front of our eyes. I'll stop here in case you've had any questions, because I know that we want to do it a bit more interview style, but I got more to say, but maybe.
I honestly, I mean, it was so clear. I mean, I didn't feel like interrupting. I would say, like, how? So, what is the methodology you're going to use to answer to this question?
So I'm using. This is in socio-legal studies, which is, you know, the empirical social science study of the law. And it's one corner of the legal scholarship that's very receptive to this idea that law and order can come from non-state sources. So I'm using social science methods, qualitative methods. It's interviews, ethnography, you know, so ethnography being digital ethnography. I'll be meeting some of the jurors of Kleros. So that's one example. I'm hanging out in, you know, our governance forums, on Discord. I'm on, you know, crypto Twitter all the time. I mean, working as an editor-in-chief as well at DLS, you know, covering DeFi, I'm exposed to these ideas all the time. So methodologically, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a very, you know, I'm in an environment that encourages like innovative methods and not so much like strict, you know, box ticking exercise. So as long as I find answers to the questions I ask, and as long as they are, like, reliable answers, I go with that. But broadly, it's interviews, ethnography, and the cool thing about our community, of course, you know, the broad, you know, crypto communities, it's all transparent. You know, there's an emphasis on like public discussions. There's a lot of reflection on, you know, things like Coder's law, for instance. And on top of this, there's also a lot of scholarship. And so one difference, my research, I guess, one way it differs from other scholarship is that it's quite empirical in the sense it's focused on what exists today rather than what blockchains can achieve. Because if you look at scholarship, there's a lot of talk on like the blockchain revolution and what smart contracts can do and can achieve. But we already have examples of, you know, of, for instance, DeFi at 100, I don't know what it is today, $120 billion total value locked across all protocols. It's been working somehow, you know, orderly with little reliance on state. So it's right there. We have mechanisms like Kleros. We have other informal mechanisms. So Kleros, I mean, we can also talk about Kleros more specifically. As I mentioned to you before, it's interesting because it's a formalized, there's formalized language around it, right? Like the tuna courts of Japan, I think comes to mind because the tuna industry in Japan developed this method of resolving their conflicts outside the state, and they use the language they borrow from state court systems. And there's something I think comforting about that because people are familiar, you know, with those words, familiar with the you know, ways of doing justice with the state. But of course, we are doing it without the state because the state doesn't have monopoly on justice. So yeah, that's a long answer
I mean, one of the things that I think that we did well was call it, as people could understand, but jurors, when we speak with people who come from the arbitration world, they are a bit, angry that we call this arbitration, because they said, oh, this is not arbitration because it doesn't work like arbitration. And maybe in the future, so arbitration is so in a broad sense you could call it arbitration, but and I think that one of the reasons of the success of Kleros is that it kind of was addressing how people saw these systems working. And even if they were not lawyers, but everyone knows a bit how legal systems work. And so the fact that we use the same vocabulary made it like close to people who, and you see this on the memes, about the trials, and it's very fun. And yeah, people use like your honor to address, the jurors, and so it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. So, good points. Yeah. So whether it's private arbitration or not, of course, is one debate. And as I said before, you'll remember maybe there's a broad definition, narrow definition.
Yeah.
And if it seems to be doing something, doesn't matter what the definition is, then there are debates whether those definitions matter. But yes, that's an interesting one. And bear in mind, though, so interesting thing about Kleros, of course, that it's and correct me if I'm wrong, it's ex post dispute resolution, right? So people, when they think about private orders, they immediately think about this, right? The conflict resolution. And it's a big part of it, of course. But it's not the only part. There's a whole background to this in preventing conflicts from arising. So the ex ante conflict prevention, right? Like before we even get to the dispute settlement phase, like how do we arise problems from, how do we prevent problems from arising in the first place? And one example of that is in the community, some of you will be familiar, the MEV case, right? Maximal extractable value. So interestingly, for those who don't know, I don't want to get into too much in detail, but because Ethereum public blockchain, there's this waiting room called the mempool. That's where like your transactions wait for like 12 seconds before they are processed by a block validator, right? And because this information is there, people have found ways to exploit it. So like sandwich attacks, front running, people submitting transactions just before your, token swap order, for instance. And there was some estimate in 2024 that it could cost up to $1 billion. And I remember there was a website where people tracked MEV, the value lost to MEV, but it's not there anymore. And interestingly, the community decided, that this is exploitative. There was a broad agreement within the Ethereum community, but also Solana, other EVM chains, that this is exploitative. People are being taken advantage of. Bad forms of MME, of course, there are also good forms. And people found solutions. So now we have like private relays, like flash bots, for instance. And now transactions go through them. It's actually 80% of all transactions. I just looked up on Dune, and probably more for like percentage of trading volume. So the MEV problem has been kind of solved. And that's an example of ex ante, And simultaneously, and we published about it on the Alness very recently, there's a court case in the US that's where these two brothers who were involved in MEV now are being accused of wire frauds. So like fraud with the internet, essentially. The Americans called wire fraud. So obviously that's a case that I think the community has pretty much solved. There are still other solutions in place, but so now we see the court stepping in. So that's interesting, right? So I'm not saying that DeFi is completely immune to the state systems. No, private order like those that you mentioned, for instance, there are more examples, right? There are money markets in Kabul. There's an interesting paper on that by Nafai Chaudhry. One of my assessors, Florian Girsal, has this book on the Fissures of Marseille. all of those communities, private orders, they still deal with the state somehow. Sometimes the state steps in. Sometimes these communities, ask for help from the state as last resort. So we know, for instance, like Zach XBT, he does amazing work, and then sometimes he shares his findings with, say, the French police, for instance. That was the case, I think, last year or the year before. And then the French police intervene and arrest this, crypto criminal. So that's like an example where, the states and private orders can work together as they come into clash sometimes as well. And for Kleros, the interesting thing, of course, you mentioned the token dispute resolution, but it also exports decisions, justice to state court systems, right? Like the state court systems also recognize, just as they do with private arbitration. There are cases of like Mexico, Colombia. Maybe you can talk about them. So that's also interesting how now the community has not only developed these mechanisms to resolve its own disputes, but also expanded to other areas that are not only related to DeFi and manages to export externally. And that we see that with other private orders as well, that they can cooperate with state systems. So the point I want to make here is that it's not a antagonistic clash, but there are a lot of overlaps.
I speak to lots of people from arbitration regulators. We have discussed with the UNCITRAL. We have helped make the rules of arbitration. We advise the ICC in France. So, and one of the things I sometimes tell them, so it's something like follows. So we will help you a lot resolve the disputes happening in this world of digital transactions, DeFi, metaverse, if you want to call it that way. So because we are like native from this other world, and you will still, you will still have a dispute, happening in the real, mid world, and that's still going to be there. But the digital world has become a new jurisdiction, and you need like a native system for resolving that. And this is kind of a private ordering coming from Kleros as a legal order. So this is what I sometimes discuss with regulators, and I don't want to. We could stay for hours discussing. Just one last question for now, and we will have you back in a few months, so you can tell us a bit about the progress that you're doing.
Yep.
Tell us, from a practical perspective. So, what are the steps in your doctorate? You're starting, and what does it look like for your roadmap? Towards the dissertation.
So academia moves very slow. I had this book idea already separately, but if you want to be taken seriously by scholarship, the scholarly communities, and if you want to publish with a university publisher, then you need to have your output supervised and have its academic quality confirmed by an institution. So and then that world moves very slowly, unlike DeFi. So I'm collecting data for 1 year. That's what I've been asked, and come October I will start submitting chapters that will then turn into a book, and I will be assessed on it again by 2 assessors, and then a final assessment. Then there will be external assessors who are experts on private orders and also blockchain law and that sort of stuff. And then hopefully that will turn into a book. And the practical implication of this research is also this. So you talked about Ed Stringham's book on private governance, which covers financial institutions and how they emerge as private clouds. Historically, states have co-opted the rules that were organically generated by communities. So the financial regulation in the US, for instance, has absorbed some of those rules, like the membership rules in the New York Stock Exchange, for instance. They've been transported to financial regulation. So hopefully one takeaway will be, if the states recognize that, the blockchain community have built a private order, maybe then the state, instead of superimposing regulation, it will, understands its internal logic and have those regulations if necessary transported into state regulation. So hopefully that's one, practical takeaway. And yeah, so 1 year of data collection, and I'll be doing like background writing and all that meanwhile. But the biggest chunk of writing is starting September. So that's how it goes. I'd like to do it as soon as possible, as I told them, because unlike other type of research that other people may be doing, DeFi moves at an incredible speed. Blockchains, things change very fast. But so we obviously had like a massive liquidation recently. We had the balancer hack, so all those things will be going into my research now. How the community responded, and same with the Kleros cases that I'll be seeing as a juror myself, and look forward to chatting with those in the community as well. So yeah, I'll leave it there, but happy to answer any question. If somebody wants to reach out privately as well, please do so.
Yeah, just one last thing. I mean, how can the community help you? I mean, people from the community watch this stream, and then how can they reach to you? Is there anything specific you need from the community to help you with your research? I mean,
reach out to me privately and just throw your ideas at me, based on what we've discussed, and I'll follow up with questions. It's very, we can also anonymize you if you don't, want to reveal your name or whatever. That's completely fine. It's very informal. I'm just saying it so that you don't feel pressure to turn it into a formal presentation. And I'd love to include interesting, insightful contributions into this book, because the contribution will be as strong as the community the book is trying to cover, not just the Kleros community, but also the wider blockchain community. But also the critics, as you said, some people will say the Kleros is not private arbitration, so their voices also need to be included and analyzed as well. So anyone remotely interested and have some thoughts on anything like code as law, private orders, and dispute resolution, or alternative resolution mechanisms, those things, just reach out, and I think whatever your contribution will be, like I'll just trust me to steer the conversation and we'll make it work. There's no process, there's no formality, but I'll assume that I have your consent if you reach out, because Oxford makes me say share with those that I collect data from, that I understand they are giving their consent and they can withdraw anytime.
Ekin, thank you very much for coming, and we will have you again in a few months, so you can learn a bit more about your program. Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, now Ekin is doing his doctorate in Oxford, doctorate in law, studying private governance systems, and what do you think, William? That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about the work he does. It's all very promising.
But go ahead with the research update.
Yeah, so in terms of the sort of like more math science research that I do, I'm a mathematician. We've been thinking a lot recently about how decentralized justice and Kleros-like platforms interact with AI. It's a very trendy topic. We wrote an article recently with Federico and me and another co-author that we've submitted. So hopefully we'll be able to see that article soon. But we think about like what is the role of AI in pre-processing different like disputes? Like how will parties use AI? How will jurors use AI? Will you have like autonomous AI that are acting as jurors? What does that look like? Like how might one adapt the architecture of the court to sort of like keep in mind that this is probably an inevitable reality, as AI tools become more widespread. We ran some experiments on some current and past Kleros cases. So I've said this in past community calls, but like I hope you'll all be able to read the article soon. Other than that, I've been thinking about some social choice theory problems. This is one of the core kinds of like academic fields that's gone into our research at Kleros over the years. All these questions about like voting and incentive systems, and how do you like put together jurors' votes to produce like a good output. Particularly if you have more than 2 possible options for the jurors to choose between. How do you like piece people's together preferences, votes? You have lots of different choices. Maybe I've ranked my choices. Maybe I've done some other kind of like nuanced vote where I'm like, well, I like this choice well enough. This choice is a little less good. How do you piece this together? Particularly thinking a lot about clones. What happens when you have choices that are very similar? How does that like impact vote splitting and things? This is something I already write about in the yellow paper years ago. Like if you look at the table of different trade-offs we have for our different voting rules, there's a column about clone independence, and you'll notice that I have like question marks in that column. I'm, getting back to that now to like think about like how do we have like a voting rule that like handles that well. If I have a malicious party, particularly like, in like an escrow kind of dispute where the parties kind of agree on what the outcomes or possible outcomes can be. If I have a sophisticated party and sort of a less sophisticated party, how do you prevent the sophisticated party from kind of like taking advantage of the less sophisticated party by manipulating what the possible dispute outcomes will be?
Cool. It's also worth mentioning that besides, the work we are doing with Ekin in the legal aspects and private governance, we also have another doctorate candidate that we are supporting at Oxford. It's Owen Green, and he's working with Paul Goldberg at the computer science department. So this is more research about mechanism design. Maybe you can explain a bit about the type of topics, that are interesting these days for our research.
Yeah, so I'm also excited about Owen's research. Hopefully he'll come on one of these calls at some point. So that's more similar to the social choice kind of research I was just describing. He has a background in computer science. He's working with Paul, who is a computer scientist. And there are interesting kind of computational social choice theory questions. So social choice theory is kind of like a branch of economics. But when you get into, you can ask interesting questions about like, okay, I have like people that are voting and I have a voting rule that puts their votes together into a collective outcome. But what if I have like computationally bounded participants, participants that have some kind of like running time and like how they, it can have different kinds of computational bounds. But maybe you like think about like what the other participants are doing and you're trying to predict like how my vote will factor in with those, like, okay, I might vote for Alice if I think my vote would push Alice over the top. And that belief that my vote will push Alice over the top is based on my view of what the other people are doing. And maybe I have like limited resources in that view. It's like, okay, I can only spend polynomial time thinking about what the other people will do. And what happens then? What kinds of like strategic voting do you have? How does like the situation of Kleros, where ultimately people are sort of voting on like some perceived truth. They get some noisy signal about what they think is true in the world, who should really win the dispute. How does that differ from like preference type voting, where people are voting for the candidate they personally want to win an election? So Owen is thinking about some of those like computational running time questions in Kleros-like voting.
We will have Owen come at some point. I guess maybe when he has a bit better defined the topic that he's going to do research, so he can present this to us. So thank you, William. Just one last thing about the research worth mentioning. So as you know, we have ongoing the Kleros Stanford Symposium with the blockchain Stanford Blockchain Law and Policy Journal. So it's a great opportunity to have your paper published if you are researching about Kleros and AI. How lots of different topics, how you can implement AI into the Kleros process. You can use it as dispute preparation. You can use it as anonymization of evidence, or you can use it as a jury agent. So any type of topic that you think is relevant for the combination between decentralized justice and AI. You can apply the Kleros Symposium at Stanford. So it's a really great opportunity to have your research published at one of the top places in the world and be read by really, really smart people. Okay, thank you, William. And let's move forward with Fortunato now. Yeah.
Hey, hello guys.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great, cool. I share my slides. Okay, here they are. Perfect. So for today, I share the highlights from curation from the past month. And for newcomers, Curate is what Federico described at the beginning of the call. So it's a tool to verify items, whether they are contract metadata on items on Web3 or real world assets. Everything can be verified through curation. And as Federico mentioned, we have use cases that are already a reality, and they are used by a lot of our partners, and which are mainly in contract metadata for verification of tag and names. But we also have other use cases like verification of prediction markets with Seer. So let's dive into the highlights from the previous month across the most active registries. So token, contracts, contract domain name, prediction market, and ATQ, we had all-time high with 863 new submission just in the previous month. And the interesting news is that the most active registry last month was contract domain name. Usually is the address tag, and the difference between these two registries is where address tags focuses on giving to a specific smart contract, so to an address, the correct name, so that when you are interacting in your wallet, it solves the problem of blind signing. You don't see just a bunch of numbers, but you see the name of the smart contract you are interacting with. And then we have contract domain name, which ties a smart contract to a specific domain. So if that domain gets hacked, so someone hacks the domain and changes the smart contract, you can see that this new smart contract doesn't belong to that domain, and you can immediately understand that that domain has been hacked. And this registry last month has been the most active with 387 new submissions that have also been rewarded with the scout incentives. We also have all-time high in removals. So in Curate, you can also remove items that were previously included, that were previously registered. And this is important because in general, contract metadata is quite static kind of item. So if a contract is deployed by a certain deployer, it will always be like that. But we have some cases where there may be some changes, which could be like in contract domain. So imagine that you tied a smart contract to a certain domain, and that domain doesn't work anymore. It's down. This needs to be updated, and the smart contract will not be tied to the domain anymore. And this is an example of removal that can happen of a submission that was registered few years ago. We also have 52 disputes completed in the previous month, and they happen across all registries. And today we usually bring examples with tokens, with smart contracts. So today I wanted to bring an example of disputes that happened with prediction markets. So we have friends that needed to pass a bill, and the question was the submitter wrote the question in the wrong way. So will friends pass a bill introduced by the union of the right and center party? And this question was wrong because this bill was not introduced by this party, but by another party. So if you're familiar with prediction markets, you can understand that the way a question is written down is extremely important for the outcome. So this market was trying to be verified. It was spotted this mistake, and it was not verified. And I think it was resubmitted with the correct question. So the interesting part is that last month we had in total more than 1,000 interactions across new submission, disputes, removals, which is also another all-time high. And a few days ago, we also released the new article for the Scout Incentive Program. So I really recommend you to read that, because you can participate to curate through the incentives. So you can earn from it, or you can earn in general, even just by, because the incentives, let me quickly explain this, the incentives are focused on new submission. So if you submit items that are compliant to certain standards, you will be rewarded for that. But in general, in Kleros Curate, you can also earn by just verifying items submitted by third parties. So you can just, with all of this submission, with 800 submission per month, you have a lot of opportunities to get bounties and to earn by verifying what other users are submitting. So I really recommend you to participate, to follow our social media pages. We are doing a lot of we are introducing a lot of news with different version of Curate. With Stay Curate, we are improving the user interface to make it easier for newcomers. So yeah, I really recommend you to join, to follow us on pages and join as a curator. So yeah, these are the main highlights from October. If you have any question, feel free to write in the chat.
Awesome. Interesting comment, especially after what Ekin explained before. So this prediction market you showed. So, this certification or verification system for prediction markets is actually, an ex-ante system to avoid disputes happening. So by making sure that all of the prediction market that are accepted into SEER, so comply with a number of situations like the clarity in language and different avoiding ambiguity in situations, can make for an early detection of a problem before there is like millions of dollars of people arguing whether this is or is not a suit, let's say. So this is important. This is why it's important, and the tokens approach that we explained before of Curate and Scout is, if we can identify the scam tokens before people buy them through a private governance certification system, then we will avoid having to resolve a dispute over millions of dollars with all of the stressful situation that this is for everyone. I mean, it's business for us, but we are happier if the world is happier, and we will comply better with our mission if we can avoid disputes happening than having to solve big disputes.
Yeah, exactly. Because with a ambiguous question, even the oracle solving that market will inevitably have problems, and there will be complaints from both parts, or there will always be someone unhappy. So it's quite important to have the question and the answers that follow certain standards.
Yeah, there you go. Ex ante and ex post dispute resolution. Yeah. So anything else, Fortunato?
No, these were the main highlights from October. It was quite an active month, so very positive.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a comment about the stake rate. Juan Samitier posted an article about the curation of DeFi vaults, and this has been a big topic this week because there were some protocols that had some issues. They are now illiquid, and people had no transparency about the assets that they were using. And I really recommend checking his article if you're into DeFi, because this implementation of stake rate can help with that. Right now, there's a lot of burden on the users on them making their due diligence, and this is something that there are some very skilled users that they can do, but there are many DeFi users that they are not. They do not have the time or the skills to check, for example, on each vault or each curator, if they have the oracles set well or the liquidation threshold set well, and they kind of trust the curator. And with this model, at least the curator can kind of self-certify. So it's very much in line with what Ekin and Federico were talking before. And I hope more people read this article and start adopting this list too.
Yeah, but also it's like a choice, because verifying through stake curate when a new vault is verified, yes, you can trust the curator, but I would say the killer feature is that if you want, you can still check by yourself, because what curate does is putting all the information there together. So as Federico said, yes, it's a business for us, but we are focusing on transparency. So you always have the opportunity to check by yourself if that vault is compliant. And, if not, in stake curate, you will be rewarded for that. There will be a permanent bounty. Let's say you want to check by yourself, you find a problem, you will get good money from it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Right now,
if you ask me what I would like to happen, I would like Kleros to eventually succeed in preventing disputes than having to resolve them. And if we can build a very robust certification system, we will avoid, people having because when there is a dispute, it's already stressful. It's already, a conflict. It's already people always, if you lose, they will also blame us, So I prefer to build a great certification ex ante system. If you ask me, of course, it's not going to prevent everything, and there's still going to be like a dispute because of contracts are incomplete, and this is the nature of the game. Fine, but since the beginning, we have started to put more focus from the disputes into more like the general trust, if you want. So Jim, you are going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what you said, that for stake curate with Juan, we put quite some effort in preventing frivolous disputes, because as you said, like the objective is not getting more dispute, but getting verified without issues. So yeah, absolutely, because we see that now that we have a good number of disputes, that there is always someone that is unhappy and trying to blame us, trying to blame the dispute. But my personal take is that we are able to mirror the result of a real case in real courts, because if you think also in real courts, when one of the party lose, they are always unhappy with the outcome. So it's part of it. So, yeah.
And one thing that I see, I'm not an expert, but I see on Twitter, people say, okay, this curator is not doing their job well, and the competitor says, okay, they're doing this wrong. And this is not a great way of solving conflicts, because it's just like a discussion that doesn't arrive at a result. And in this case with stake curate, there will be a list of criteria that people can object and create a challenge, and there's an incentive. So there's like a bounty to do that. So instead of just winning Twitter discussion points, people can actually earn money or have their money at stake. I think that could be possible, positive for this ecosystem.
Cool. Well, let's stop this because we are more than 1 hour. So let's move on. Let me tell you a bit. Thank you, Fortunato. Some updates, general updates about Kleros. I think you can stay here, Jean. So we are moving forward with the audits for Kleros 2.0. So as you know, we are developing this new version of Kleros with lots of improvements. Not going to go again over all that, but we are auditing internally all of the smart contracts to make sure that, well, to the best of our knowledge, at least there are no vulnerabilities. So every member of the development team, is kind of now working on the audits. And then after we pass the internal audit process, we are going to go to an external audit process that is going to, I don't know if I can mention the auditor, because I'm just not going to say anything, because just in case I don't screw up. Well-known auditor. So this is important update about the project. And so Marcos is not today here with business development updates because he's in Ed City in San Martin de los Andes. They gave yesterday workshop about Kleros and enterprise and how we work with the Lemon and how we work with governments. There's a lot of interest from, well, the Ethereum Foundation about real world, solution, real world applications of blockchain in general. They invited us to give this workshop about how we are working with the enterprise companies, governments, so they can understand better how to approach this. This is in the context of, I think this is, the name is DCOM, Gene, I think, decentralized commerce.
Yes, it's Ori, who is the guy that is organizing this residency. He's working on this unit called, I think, use cases. So, and one of the focus is DCOM.
Yeah, so we are in touch with so many people from the Ethereum Foundation. One of them is the DCOM. Another one is the enterprise section. Then there is Tio from the academic. So we do so many different things, because of governments, companies, academia. So we are, I mean, we will end up acquiring the Ethereum Foundation if we continue like this, Okay, so San Martin de los Andes was Marcos and Facu were there giving the workshop. I was last week in Chile at the Legal Tech Conference speaking. So this is not a crypto conference. It was like more of for lawyers, general counsels of the most important companies and governments from Latin America, trying to push our enterprise solutions. Of course, I cannot comment on ongoing conversations, but the goal was to approach governments and approach insurance companies, neobanks, and all of the institutions we are focusing on with the enterprise segment. I also recommend, people from, crypto projects to go to conferences from their industry. If you are doing like a DeFi, I mean, you should go to finance, conferences. If you are doing, whatever, insurance, decentralized protocol, you should go to insurance and so learn how, things work in the real world of people who have been doing this for decades. And not just go to crypto conferences, because otherwise it's all of this endogamic thing of just meeting the same people and not learning, because there is only so much you can learn from people who are doing the same that you are doing. One of the things I think we did right at Kleros since the very early days is to connect to those who are working in the real world of commerce, insurance, and governments. Okay, so I was in Chile. Then another important thing is that we have the applications open for the fellowship 9th batch. This started in 2018, so this is one of the things that makes me more happy about Kleros. We are also seeing like a lot of applications. Each year we have more applications because the fellowship program is more and more important, and so also we are. Every year we kind of close it like the window for applying is smaller, shorter, because we have already more than 20 candidates, and we typically don't want to take more than 10, let's say, because it takes time from the team to help them and that. But I mean, if they're good, we'll take them. In the end, we end up taking everyone who is a good candidate, regardless if. So tomorrow I have a full day of interviewing candidates, and Friday I have also a lot of interviews. So I'm going to spend the next few days interviewing candidates, which is great because you see what people are seeing in Kleros, the type of topics that they are interested. Lots of people now are interested in like AI and Kleros. Others are interested in how Kleros can interact with the legal systems. What we are doing in Mendoza. What we are doing in Argentina with the Consumer Defense Agency, and how Kleros can become binding for solving consumer disputes. So those are the topics that are more interesting for people now. So we have that. We are preparing the road for DevConnect. We have tons of activities. I mean, I guess we could say that Edge City with Marcos and Facu was the kickoff of the DevConnect for us. So
yes, definitely.
we're going.
Now we have 3 weeks of events basically. So.
Yeah. 3 weeks of partying, oh, Federico, get to work, okay, so we have myself. I mean, yeah, honestly, it's not fun because I have like tons of talks to give. So first we have Alex is going to speak at the SITGov conference. They have like a future key prediction market things. I'm going to go. I declined the speaking slot there because it was already too much, but so I will be there. That is on Saturday. Then on Sunday, there is a football tournament that I'm going to play. For this tournament, we partner with another project, but we don't present ourselves as the Kleros team because it's too much of an advantage for us. It's I mean, we are undefeated in football in the blockchain ecosystem. So Kleros never lost a game in the blockchain tournaments. Okay, so that is on Sunday. Monday we have the meeting of the cooperative that we do every year. Some point where the team meets. Then we have Funding the Commons. I'm going to be speaking at Funding the Commons with Mario Adaro, who is the judge with whom we started the Mendoza integration, which is the government application of Kleros. I have another talk with the Universidad Austral, the university where I did my PhD. They have a panel because they teach blockchain, and they asked me to present Kleros in the context of that block. What else, Jean? I mean, I think maybe William as well will have a talk. What else? I'm forgetting for sure some things.
Okay. I know Fortunat Facundo will have a couple of talks. I think three or four talks.
Yeah.
Related to legal events and also the integration with Mendoza. We have been receiving lots of requests about that because it's something that every crypto project wants to do. So yeah. And yeah, I don't remember exactly. We were invited to Arbiverse, the event by Arbitrum, and the V2 is being deployed on Arbitrum. So we will meet all of the potential partners that are in the chain. We'll have like a booth in the conference. We were also invited by the Ethereum Foundation
in the booth. Let me just add that in the booth we will have like people doing like workshops where you can experience what this feels like to be a Kleros juror in one of these cases of consumer dispute resolution. So if you are in the conference, go to our booth and then you can like be a juror and deliver justice to the world.
Yeah, but we'll have a booth both in the DevConnect main event, which will be like a fair, and also on the Arbiverse event. So probably the technical people will be at the Arbiverse event. So if you have questions about the cross-chain disputes on Kleros or things like that, it will be the right place to go. And also we were invited to an event by the Nouns DAO, which we were collaborating with them on some escrow thing. And an event by the Ethereum Foundation called DEAC, which is Decentralization Acceleration. And it's also very aligned with the things that we were talking today about creating acceleration technologies for example, curating information and things like that. So yeah, I think
I'm so happy that this is going to take place in Argentina and Buenos Aires. I mean, this is a dream come true. No.
Yeah. Oh, and also you will be participating on a panel about the history, right?
Yeah, I forgot. I'm going to be the panel with I guess yeah. Okay, I will continue. Don't worry. I'm going to be at this panel about the history of Ethereum in Argentina with Crypto Chica, with Facu Españolo, who actually Facu was in charge of the Aragon court when it existed, and then when Aragon pivoted, and then he's doing some DeFi project. so CryptoChica, Facu, and Mariano Di Pietra, who was the early team member from, well, at least in Latin America, from MakerDAO. So I'm going to be speaking there and our experience, the history of Ethereum in Argentina. So it's going to be really, really cool. I think I have like one or two more things I'm forgetting now, but I guess it's already a lot. Also, this is a very long community call. I don't know if Gene is going to come back. I guess he was in the airport in Brazil. Gene is going to the Ethereum Brazil conference in Sao Paulo. So yeah. Okay. Anything else? I know William and Fortunato, all good. We can call it a day, I guess. Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for coming. See you for those who want to come. Next community call is going to be the one in Spanish next Monday at 9 p.m. UTC. Then the other one, the next one in English, is going to be next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Thank you guys for coming, and see you on Monday. Bye-bye.